Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are going to divide polynomials using synthetic division. So when you're going to use synthetic division, you can only do that if in the binomial you're dividing by, the lead coefficient is 1. If you've got anything other than a 1 there, you cannot use synthetic division. You have to use long division. For synthetic division, we use the opposite of the non-variable in the binomial. So that's a plus 5. So we're going to use a minus 5. And then inside this little box here, we're going to put these coefficients, 3, 4, and negative 12. Okay, so that's our setup. Now to divide, first we're going to bring down that number. And then we're going to multiply. Negative 5 times 3 is negative 15. Then we're going to add. 4 plus negative 15 is negative 11. Then we're going to multiply. Negative 5 times negative 11 is 55. Then we're going to add. Negative 12 plus 55 is 43. I'm going to put a little separator between these last two coefficients down here. That separates out my remainder. So I've got a constant term, and I've got an x, and I've got a remainder. 3x minus 11 with a remainder of 43. That can also be written as 3x minus 11 plus 43 over x plus 5. For purpose of what we're going to do with this in upcoming lessons, this right here will be just fine. Okay, so number 2, the opposite of that non-variable is 3. My coefficients are 1, negative 5, negative 12. And between these two, I'm going to put in a separator for my remainder. So our setup is done. Bring down the 1, and then it's just multiply and add, multiply and add. 3 times 1 is 3. Add, negative 2. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. Add, negative 18. Here's my remainder, constant term, and my x term. 1x minus 2 with a remainder of negative 18. Number 3 throws in one little difference. We still start with the opposite there, negative 1. X to the 4th, I have one of those. I don't have any x cubed, so I'm going to put in 0x cubed. Negative 3x squared. I don't have an x term, so 0, and then plus 12. I've got to put in a 0 placeholder for any of the descending powers that are missing. So I've got an x to the 4th, x cubed, x squared, x, and a constant term. If there are any descending powers missing, you've got to put in 0 of them, just like you would in long division. Bring down the 1, and then multiply and add, multiply and add, multiply and add. Multiply, negative 1, add, negative 1. Multiply, 1, add, negative 2. Multiply, 2, add, 2. Multiply, negative 2, add, 10. Remainder, constant, x squared, x cubed. So I have 1x cubed minus 1x squared. I don't have to write that 1. So minus x squared minus 2x plus 2 with a remainder of 10. Negative 3. I have a constant x squared, x cubed. No missing powers here. So 2, 3, negative 8, 3. Bring down the 2. Multiply. Add. Multiply. Add. Multiply. Add. So my remainder is 0, so I don't have a remainder. That means that x plus 3 actually divides evenly into that other polynomial. So I get constant x squared, 2x squared, minus 3x plus 1. We'll end this lesson now with a brief review of solving quadratic equations by completing the square and by using the quadratic formula. So in order to solve by completing the square, we have to have a lead coefficient of 1, but here the lead coefficient is 5. So we are going to divide both sides by 5. So we get x squared minus 4x plus 6 equals 0. Okay, so now we need to make room for a new c. So this c we're going to move over to the right and leave space for a new c. So we have x squared minus 4x, and we'll leave a blank, equals negative 6. And whatever I fill in for this blank, I have to match that on the other side. So I'll put a blank there to match. Okay, now to get the new c, we take b and divide it by 2 and square the result. Okay, so it's b over 2 squared, so that's negative 2 squared, which is 4. So our new c is 4, and we have now made a square trinomial here on the left side. Okay, so now we need to factor that. And what multiplies to 4 and adds to negative 4 is negative 2 and negative 2. And here's a little shortcut. Whatever we end up with right here is the number that multiplies by itself to make this c term and adds to itself to make this b term. Okay, so we have x minus 2 times x minus 2, which is x minus 2 squared. And negative 6 plus 4 is negative 2. Okay, so here's our factored form. We have a squared here, so to get rid of that, we will do a square root on both sides. And this cancels, and we're left with x minus 2 equals, and we now automatically have a positive and negative square root of negative 2. Remember, when you have a squared in your equation, that means you're going to get two answers. And here's how we get our two answers. Okay, so we're going to move this minus 2 over to the other side. So we have x equals positive 2 plus or minus. And then we can simplify this square root of negative 2. The square root of negative 1 is I. So we have I times the square root of 2. And then solve by quadratic formula. So that's x equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so b is negative 2, so that means opposite of b is positive 2, plus or minus the square root of, and I'll put that radical on later, b squared, so that's negative 2 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is 7, all over 2 times a. So we have 2 plus or minus, okay, then that square root, what's underneath that radical, I'll just type that all into my calculator. So we have negative 2 squared, which is 4, minus 4 times 3 times 7. So we have negative 80. So it's the square root of negative 80. And 2 times 3 is 6. Okay, so that square root of 80 we need to simplify. So we have 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 1 times, and then 80, we need to see if any square numbers go into 80. 4 is a square number that goes into 80. Let's see if any bigger square numbers go in. 9 isn't going to go into 80. How about 16? 80 divided by 16. Okay, 16 times 5. So I've got a square number here times 5. Okay, all over 6. So that's 2 plus or minus. The square root of 16 is 4. The square root of negative 1 is I. And then 5 stays right inside. All over 6.
And now I can do one more thing to simplify this, because a 2 can go into 2, 4, and 6. So I can factor a 2 out of all three terms here. So that's 1 plus or minus 2i times the square root of 5 over 3. That can also be written as 1/3 plus or minus 2i root 5 over 3. So either way is an acceptable final answer.